leaders of countries, talking to people who have had extraordinary experiences in life that gave them some insight to the reality of things, freedom, for instance. Talked to a lot of people about the idea of freedom.
Stalin, Marx, Gramsci, all of these guys talked about how America was like a healthy body, and its resistance was it was threefold: it's patriotism, it's morality, and it's spiritual life. And if you were able to deprive America of these things, then indeed you could rot her from within. And that's what we've seen. And you see so many great paleocons, etc., the Pat Buchanans of the world talk about how, you know, America and the Western civilization's issues and problems are not economic, they're not social, they're not political, but they are indeed moral. And so I don't just believe, I know that the degradation of the Christian character of Europe and of America has indeed not only led to, but acted as a catalyst to the demise of our great civilization.
One young man who was born and raised in North Korea in a prison camp. He didn't know anything but that until he was 26 years old.
Well, it's very encouraging to hear, because whenever I get worried about the world, to hear you and Charlie say, we're going to be fine.
No, we are. We're going to be fine.
The world's going to be fine. Thank you, Morgan Freeman.
So that's the thing, it's the kind of divide and conquer method they've been using. So everything's so confused, they spend most of the time arguing about what is right, and then they don't see the enemies coming in and infiltrating because they're arguing over who's right.
So it's this business of civilizations die because of suicide and not because of murder. And hell, this is the greatest mass suicide.
And it's now or never. This is the fight. Things are escalating. They're getting, just in the past year alone, it's insane. How, like, because so many people just aren't aware, so they can't see, you know, the car crashes going on in the background because, you know, they have headphones on and are looking at something else. But this is really, we are hurtling towards our own destruction.
Every other religion, near enough, tells you that the path to God is lined with effort. Do the right things. Don't wear that. Do eat that. Fast, pray, give to charity, and maybe you'll be found on the right side of judgment. Now, the Christian faith agrees that God's standard is high, but it says that his standard is unreachably high. That's how good he is. And yet, wonderfully, the story of the Christian faith is not us fruitlessly striving to reach God, but God striving to reach us. And this offer of grace is revolutionary. It is totally different from every other worldview. But I discovered it's so much more. If he is a God who longs for a relationship with the people he's made, then it's about so much more than convincing us that he exists. Secondly, I'm not sure coercive acts of proof would really convince us. I remember chatting to a very dear friend of mine who had no religious convictions, and I said, what do you think God would have to do to convince you he existed? And he went, he'd have to levitate that table and then put it down in front of me right now. And I said, Jonathan, if he really did that though, would you honestly believe he was there? And he went, to be honest, no, I think I'd gone mad. So what would it look like for him to prove himself to us? Well, in Jesus, God has shown himself in a way that actually communicates what he's interested in. You. He's not interested in your religious performance or your moral efforts or even in your intellectual efforts, which is why he hasn't revealed himself as an ethical principle or as a logic formula. He's revealed himself as a person because he's interested in you at a personal level. At the heart of our problem is that no one has ever seen God. This question is so fudged and foggy. That's actually something the Bible admits. That's actually a quote you find in the Bible. No one's ever seen God. And here's how the Bible continues that thought. It's in that book, John's Gospel, which we've been quoting from. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in the closest relationship with the Father, he has made him known.
All the millions and millions of lives, half the earth, for 2,000 years, have been touched, have felt their lives touched and inspired by some nutter. I don't believe it.
So therefore it follows that you believe he was divine.
Yes.
And therefore it follows that you believe that he rose physically from the dead.
Yes, yeah, I'm no problem with miracles. I'm living around them. I am one.
But the unique claim is a real person whose impact on history has changed the world and who has been changing it ever since, and has left a trail of eyewitness evidence and changed lives, even a transformed world, to be investigated. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is at the Father's side, he has made him known.
Yes.
The risen Jesus.
Yes.
And you believe that he made promises which will come true.
Yes. I do.
For almost 2,000 years, this has been a place where Christian faith and history meet. Now science is here, confirming what so many believe.
It's not okay for people to make sweeping religious truth claims without evidence. But the Christian faith from its very beginning underlined the resurrection of Jesus in history as a reason to believe. The fact of an empty tomb and a risen Jesus is what convinced them at the time.
It's not evidence of Jesus' body, but it suggests they're looking in the right place. Science and the scriptures, often at odds, in agreement tonight, with many questions still to answer.
And I have to say, nearly 20 centuries later, when I was an atheist, investigating this evidence, it convinced me too. Now, we might have lots of questions about the miraculous things Jesus does in the Bible. Do ask them. It's worth saying just for now that these are historical documents that we're looking at, which bear all the signs of eyewitness testimony. But a big point to get is this. The miracles of Jesus are not divine party tricks. Look what I can do. They are pointers to what God ultimately plans for the world. Get to the end of the Bible and you find the picture is of a changed world. A world made new, a world without the suffering in it.
And we know that's going to be what happens. We know that because it's been prophesized in the Bible. And so far, so good on the prophecies, right? We've just got a couple more left to fill. And so, we know that before the next stage, so to speak, this is what's going to happen. You're going to see a charismatic renewal of the faith because it's truth. And after, it's this business of, a sea of lies and telling the truth is a revolutionary act. You know what? God is merciful while we're alive, but he is a just judge. And we forget about that picture about God sometimes.
Someone asks, if God became human to understand our suffering, does that mean God didn't understand human suffering before that? Is he not all-knowing?
Great question. A great question. Whoever asked that is probably someone who's thinking about classical theology. Well, the answer is a sort of yes and no. As God, someone who is, nothing like us, whose knowledge of things is of a different order, there is nothing he does not know, of course. But that's not the same as personal experience, is it? And God becoming flesh in Jesus, actually a lot of that is on offer to us. It's not that in the incarnation he began to know things he didn't have an intellectual understanding of before, but rather he made it scandalously possible for him to experience things that it was not possible for the divine being to experience before. God cannot change, God cannot suffer, God cannot die. But in the incarnation you find God taking another nature to himself.
If Jesus says he's the only way to God, is that fair for people who were raised in another religion and have never heard of God? Surely it's not their fault they were taught another truth and yet will be rejected by God because he placed them in a different culture or religion.
Great. Thank you. I think that's a really big question, and actually, given what I've just said, a really obvious question, so thank you. A few things to say about that. One of the shocking things you'll find when you investigate Jesus is the reason why people the reason why people are rejected by God is not actually because of where they were born. It's not actually because of the culture they were in. It's not even actually because of the beliefs they hold. The reason why God rejects people on Judgment Day is because of the lives they've lived. That's the bar. And I feel like we need to begin there to understand that salvation is not a matter of it's not a matter of being born in the right place. Far from it. It's a matter of meeting a standard that is unreachably high, which is why in this book, in this biography of Jesus, Jesus offhandedly says that we are condemned already because we've fallen short of the standard that is his. So I think a few different responses into that question. Firstly, to say that being born in a Christian country is no guarantee of actually coming to faith yourself. And I hope that's something that you're getting from these presentations. What Jesus has come to offer is not just that you belong to a particular culture, but that you encounter him, that you are face to face with his claims and make up your own mind. Second, to say that God will be nothing less than just. Paul, again, this time writing to the Romans, he suggests that people will be judged on the basis of what they know, that their consciences will be part of how God judges.
Parable from the Bible of the 10 what do they call them, like brides, so to speak, where they've got their oil, and 5 of them come with oil, 5 of them don't, and then Jesus shuts the door, and they're like, hey, do you have some oil for us? Do you have some oil for us? And he shuts the door. We have to remember that we know how this story ends, and like, sorry, not everyone's called, but like few actually are chosen. And the thing that is amazing about this life is that we can choose to be part of this call, to answer God's call, and to actually make a difference here. And it's not enough to retreat anymore. The spiritual battle that is occurring has intensified, and the forces of darkness, frankly, have taken over. If you don't see that, if you don't understand that Islam and the globalists and the cultural Marxist is on the march, then you're not paying attention. And if you're fine with forfeiting it, well, then God have mercy on your soul.